Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Magandang hapon, as we also say in the Philippines. I'm Colleen Salamat, the Outreach and Operations Manager of ARIEL, or the Asian Research Institute for Environmental Law. And welcome to today's webinar. Welcome to Breaking Barriers, Gender and Environmental Justice in ASEAN. So special thanks, of course, to Asia Pacific Network for Environmental Defenders, our co-organizer for this event, and of course the ASEAN Sochi Caucus. And today we're gonna unpack what it really means when we say no climate justice without gender justice, or no climate justice without queer justice. So today we're gonna really define what it actually means. And of course, the climate crisis disproportionately impacts vulnerable groups, especially women, girls, the LGBTQIA plus communities, the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersex, asexual, non-binary, and gender diverse persons. And of course, across ASEAN, the women and LGBTQIA plus organizations are also at the forefront of community-based environmental defense, climate action, and human rights advocacy. So in this webinar, we'll hear their stories, examine gender transformative and feminist solutions to environmental and gender injustice, and at the same time showcase the recent publication of APNED, which is the Rise and Resist, Women Leading Environmental and Human Rights Defense in Asia and the Pacific. And we're very fortunate today that two of the women who were featured in the publication are with us. So without further ado, I'll pass it to Jonila Castro. Jonila is an environmental and human rights activist from the Philippines. She is also the spokesperson of Kalikasan People's Network for the Environment, a nationwide environmental campaign center based in the Philippines, composed of various NGOs, grassroots organizations, and environmental advocates. She also serves as a national council member of Karapatan Alliance Philippines, a national organization dedicated to promoting and protecting human rights. As a defender, Jonila faces threats for her activism. She is a victim survivor of abduction and enforced disappearance, which occurred while she and her colleague Jed were conducting a community investigation into destructive development projects. She also faced several judicial harassment cases from state forces. But despite this, she remains her unwavering commitment into environmental justice and human rights. Jonila continues to advocate for the protection of the environment and people's rights against destructive projects and to support campaigns for fellow defenders and activists under attack in the Philippines. So, Jonila, over to you.
Okay, hello, good day, everyone. Thank you for inviting me here. This is a privilege. So the presentation, oh yeah, it's here. Okay, from the first slide. So in my discussion, okay, while we are waiting, in this presentation, we will see how, why, and how we women environmental and human rights defenders are pushing or pushbacking against the system that perpetuates um, environmental destruction and gender-based violence. So, okay, here's the first slide. So, first, before we talk about how the triple planetary crisis disproportionately impact us, women and the girls, we should ask why. So we have to look into the wider context, um, how the environmental and climate crisis happens, together with gender-based threats that we are experiencing. So both of this is being created and perpetuated by the capitalist system that prioritizes profit over the people and the environment. We know that corporations, um, all they are caring about is extracting all the resources they need at the cheapest possible. Big corporations do not care how dirty and destructive they can be. They do not care about the environmental impacts. They do not care if our environment will be destructed, if our natural defense against the climate crisis effects will be lost. They don't care if our communities will be displaced and the P communities will be displaced also from their jobs. They do not care even if it will cause human rights violations. So in a capitalist system, they only prioritizes profit. And aside from that, it is also the capitalist system that maintains the patriarchal and misogynistic culture we still have today. Even though right now the issues of women is becoming more progressive, the very fact that we still do these kinds of webinars regarding women is a fact that we still need to push through to fight for our place in the struggle in the society. So it is also the capitalist system that maintain that women and girls are in communities, especially in rural communities and far-flung communities. Women and girls are still being seen as carers of male workers and future workers, the children. Um, Women are also experiencing discrimination in work, having less wages. Women are also seen as ornamentals for the products of the capitalists, entertainers, and also commodities. So this is the system that not just created the environmental and climate crisis, but also benefits from the patriarchal and misogynistic culture. So next slide. So on the next slide, so how are we how does the triple planetary crisis disproportionately impact women and girls? We already know the impacts, the environmental impacts, the socioeconomic, cultural, political impacts of destructive projects and the climate crisis, the loss of our natural resources, destruction of our environment, joblessness, poverty. But if you are a woman or a girl, there is another layer of threat that you are experiencing. Example, in the on the socioeconomic aspect, if you are a mother of in a fisher folk community that you experience a reclamation project that displaced your husband from their livelihood, you're the ones who has to think of what food you will put on the table in order to feed your children. You're the one who has to think on the financial aspect, on how to continue the education of the children. So this is one of the reasons. Also, example, in a disaster affected areas, example here in the Philippines, there are situations in which the women are being pushed on jobs that they don't even want to enter, like prostitution, because their husbands lost their livelihood or they have a low income. So this is the added situation of women in this on the socio-economic aspect. On a cultural, we know that as long as the economic situation, environmental situation is getting worse, also the cultural situation is getting worse. Next, in the political aspect, we know that in Southeast Asia, many environmental defenders are victims of human rights violations, and the women are also there. We are both experiencing the threats of harassment, intimidations, illegal surveillance, criminalizations, and even killings, and also enforced disappearances. But on top of all that, we also have this another layer of gender-based threats. Example, in militarized communities, there are reports here in the Philippines for the past months. Example, um, women in and girls in militarized communities are experiencing sexual harassments from the military. There, we also have this history that the military um leave the women and girls are pregnant, something like that. So those are the other gender-based threats that we have as a woman. I would also like to share my experience. It is something personal that when I experienced enforced disappearance when we were in the hands of the military, while we were in the secret detention facility, um they were threatening us to, if we will not surrender to the Philippine government as terrorists or enemies of the states. Um, they threatened us that they said, you know that we can do things to you. You know what we can do. You know we can sexually harass you. So at that time, we were not only afraid because they can kill us, they can hurt us, because you're also afraid that you will be violated as a woman. So all the things that we are always talking about, the effects of environmental and climate crisis, the women and girls have this another layer of burden that we are carrying. So that's the this is the system that this is the phase of capitalist system that only profits for the that prioritizes profit over the people's rights and the environment. So for us, women EHRDs, as long as there is a capitalist system that creates, perpetuates, and benefits from the environmental and climate crisis, there is gender injustice. So this is where the woman pushback comes from, to fight against the system and change that. So next slide. Okay, so for our feminist solution for and gender justice, so number one I put here is to empower women and girls. As I've said earlier, we know that the world is getting progressive in the talks of gender, but it is not the same situation in rural and far-flung communities. In the communities that we have visited, women still see themselves lower than the men. Examples, in a community example in the reclamation area, I used to work. When we invite them on meetings or consultation, they often say, "Oh, it's fine. My husband can go. My job is to take care of the children," something like that. They do not see themselves as part of the struggle or someone that can do something on the issue, who can take action. So it is important for us to empower other women and girls, to let them know that they actually hold the 50% of the forces that we can mobilize for our advocacies. So by empowering them, we mean proactively inviting women and girls to go with us in meetings, in discussions like this, in asking for their opinions, to empower them, to let them know that they can participate in this. Second, um, is let women take the lead. So here in the Philippines, um, we have sectoral organizations, but we also have women sectoral organizations. There are organizations of women peasants, um, women indigenous peoples, women fisher folks, um, uh, spouses of drivers like the piston women, the women workers. We also have progressive parliamentarians who are women. So aside from their own sectoral issues, as a woman, as a peasant, as a fisher folk, as a as an indigenous people, they're also giving gender-based discussions or ensuring that the gender-based issues are in line or or included in their campaigns. So these organizations are also discussing women's rights. So this is one way to empower the women in the communities. They share the women's rights, anti-sexual harassment discussions, so something like that, aside from their sectoral issues. Also, in order to let women take the lead, we know that as women, we have other roles, especially the mother, the pregnant woman. So we have these mechanisms where we can ensure that they can still participate in the struggle, but also not leaving their other works as mothers. So here in the Philippines, we have this mechanism to ensure the collective care of the children. So we have daycares that ensure that the children of activist mothers are being taken care of. We should also enable this kind of practice, the collective care among us. We should also, it is not just among us women, but also we can include men. So, example, in our organization, um we have colleagues that are mother. If we know that she has a meeting or something that she has to go to for her advocacy, um she just had to um inform us that if we can, she can just ask us if we can take care of her child, something like that, and we do that. So these are our ways as women to enable each other to participate in the struggle. Lastly, it is to unite with other sectors in the struggle against the current system and for system change. So we have to, whenever we talk about women and girls, gender-based issues, let us not forget, of course, that it is not an issue between men and women, but it is an issue of the capitalist system that enables um this kind of gender-based issues we have right now. We have to continue to unite with other sectors. So, example, in environmental advocacy, we know that in this advocacy, we span from experts up to grassroots communities. So we have to unite with each other, especially the women. It is only the way for us to struggle against the current system we have now and to attain system change. So this is where I end my presentation. Um, Last slide. So women environmental rights defenders fight for environmental and gender justice. I just want to end my presentation in saying that both the environmental and gender justice will be attained only through social justice. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jonila, and thank you very much, really, for sharing your experiences. And I'm so sorry that you have really had to go through it, but still, thank you that you're with us now and you still continue the good fight. And I really really like what you said. Like it's really building on the foundation that the main problem is that we still have a capitalistic system that really profit proliferates with the patriarchal system and misogynistic cultures. But even and that's what we have to remind ourselves, that we really have to identify all these intersectionalities of environmental and other sectoral issues. That's what we're really doing today and having this webinar. So yeah, thank you so much again, Janila. But just a reminder for everyone that we're going to be having a question and answer such open forum portion later on. So you may use the Q&A box for your questions, and our speakers will address it later on. So yes, and speaking of intersectionalities, we have Lina Zurlia, the Advocacy Manager of ASEAN Soji Caucus, because Lia is an Indonesian queer feminist with over a decade of experience advocating for the intersection of queer issues, feminism with human rights, and movement building in Indonesia and Southeast Asia. She has led regional initiatives for advocacy, protection, and capacity building, supporting human rights defenders and marginalized communities through the ASEAN Strategic Caucus. Over to you, Lini.
Thank you, Colin. As Colin, am I audible clearly?
Yes, very clearly. And sorry for
Okay.
pronouncing your name wrong. Sorry, it's Lini Zurlia.
No worries, Colin. No worries. Thank you for the opportunity. And as I think I want to echo what our presenter earlier has already shared from her perspective. And yes, it is when we talk about the impact on gender and how gender lens view the climate change, environmental degradations, and all of the issues that are currently we are facing, no matter where we are, we have to point who caused all of this. And I think earlier mentioned that because of the capitalism, then today we experience what we experience today. I mean, in Indonesia, it is now very hot, very dry, and some part of the country has are experiencing forest fire now, and as the opposite in the Philippines, now experiencing the flood. I mean, ASEAN Segi Caucus is registered in the Philippines, and surrounding of our office now in Manila is flooded. So imagine how the crisis is really, it's really live reality that no one can even avoid except the rich, right? Except those who are creating all of this mess. And I want to also mention that when it comes to the most marginalized people, groups, community, including people who are belong to gender diverse and sexual orientations diverse community, it's very sad. It's very um, um, yeah. I don't have a best word to um, picture or even express how the impact is experienced by the community, by the group who are not even recognized both by the state and by the society. So let's take a look at the current example of the earthquake that was taking place in eastern part of Indonesia, in Nusa Tenggara Timur, where our siblings are, affected by this earthquake. And then the questions the questions that is the most, intriguing, and it's very um it's very intriguing for us to respond to is, in the time of crisis, in the time of disaster, is the shelter open enough to the people who are not recognized by the society? Is the shelter safe enough for the people who seen different by the society? And these questions can then reflect us on the impact that queer community who are not recognized, mostly in our region, um, that questions that where we can see the impact the most. And when we talk about the impact, we should also think about the mitigations, or before the disaster, during the disaster, and after the disaster. Um, the safety and security mitigations, the preparedness of early warning disaster. Does all these informations or system include people who are not, you know, um, who are pushed to the margin, both by the state actors and by the society in general? And then during the disaster, as I mentioned earlier, the shelter, the safety, the healthcare, the evacuation processes, the camp, are they safe enough, or are they welcoming the again, people who are pushed to the margin, especially in this case is the queer community? Are they receiving any good relief, the disaster relief by the state? And then after the disaster, do they include it in the recovery livelihood mechanism? Um, if their houses are destroyed by the disaster, will their house replace as other community member, or they need to go through some series of other, discriminatory action that they need to face? So this series of questions that it has to come into our mind when, the actual disaster is taking place as a result of the climate crisis, ecological crisis, and environmental crisis. And I think these are the questions where we can, when I can pose for everyone here who joined the session, so that they can think of during the disaster, or even during the mitigations system, or after the disaster. If they don't realize about this thing, they can then, start to think of, oh yeah, during that period, are there any people who are pushed to the margin and is not, equipped with all the relief system that has prepared by both state actor and non-state actors? So excuse my mumbling, but that's the questions that we are supposed um, to pose, I think, especially for us who care or who works in the area of impact on environmental crisis. And I want to give one example that recently ASEAN Sogi Caucus organized a convening on environmental rights and how queer community struggle around a struggle to fight against the injustice and building into the intersection of the experience. And one experience that shared during the convening was when there was a case when a trans woman sent to jail just because in the camp during the disaster she was taking a shower in the women public bathroom, and it was taking place in the shelter camp. So could you imagine the story, that the that really experienced by the queer community, where the impact might experience um by people in surrounding affected area of the disaster, but it takes different form when you are not recognized in the society in general, and also not recognized by the state in principle. So I think I just want to stop there to trigger the discussion, and again, um, using that question that I posed earlier, just so that we can reflect on our own works when we deal with the environmental crisis that is manifest in a disaster. I'll stop there, Colin. I hope there will be another discussion that we can further discuss later. Thank
Yes,
you.
of course. Thank you so much, Lini. And yeah, like especially now at this rainy season, the increase natural risks, hazards, and of course the disaster that like you said earlier, the vulnerable groups, of course, the queer communities, the women are really pushed into margins, and that is something that we really have to ask ourselves, and what we really have to advocate to the government as well. Like, how do we stop being more burden for to them, and how do we make sure that even amid disasters the communities are safe, the women are safe, girls are safe, the queer communities are safe. And it's already written in the ASEAN declaration, but we'll go further into that later. But yeah, it really poses more questions, and but for later on we can discuss it further. But for our next speaker, we have Agustin, who will actually be speaking in Bahasa, but we have Triana who will be helping in the interpretation. So for everyone's reference, there's an interpretation button right there. I believe you guys are by now experts on Zoom. So you can use the interpretation button with with Rihanna, who will be helping for the interpretation. And Augustine is one of the founders of the Dongi Dongi Women's Struggle Organization, a women's organization that provides a space for Dongi Dongi women to build solidarity and fight for their rights. She is also actively involved in the National Democratic Women's Organization in Indonesia, or SERUNI, and currently serves as the chairperson of the SERUNI Dongi Dongi branch. She has also been a member of SERUNI's national committee since the organization's first congress. And in addition to her work on women's rights and land rights, Agustin is a member of the Forum Petani Merdaka, or FPM, where she serves as the organization's treasurer. In her daily life, she continues to work as a farmer while also contributing to community education by teaching at a school independently established by FPM. Augustin's experience demonstrates a close connection between women's struggles, indigenous peoples' rights, land rights, environmental justice, food security, and community-based education. For her, defending the land is not only about protecting livelihoods, but also preserving the identity, knowledge, culture, and the future of the Dongi Dongi community for generations to come. So over to you, Augustin. Yeah, Augustin. Hi, Augustin. Please go ahead.
Sebelumnya, saya minta maaf kalau ada suara yang bising. Memang di sini sudah tempatnya yang bagus kita. Perspektif perempuan adat dongi-dongi dalam memperjuangkan tanah, lingkungan, dan hak demokrasi rakyat. Krisis alam dan kerusakan lingkungan bukan persoalan ekologis, namun juga merupakan persoalan ekonomi, politik, dan sosial, dan hak asasi manusia. Dalam dampak kerusakan lingkungan tidak selalu sama dirasakan oleh semua orang di semua kelas. Kelompok yang sama, ekonomi, politik, dan sosial berada dalam posisi termarginalkan justru sering menanggung dalam dampak paling besar, padahal mereka yang dalam posisi yang paling lemah dan kebijakan yang berkaitan dengan lingkungan dan sumber daya alam. Perempuan, khususnya perempuan pedesaan dan perempuan suku bangsa minoritas, berada dalam posisi yang sangat penting dalam situasi ini. Di satu sisi, mereka menghadapi dampak yang lebih besar akibat hilangnya akses terhadap tanah, hutan, air, dan sumber daya alam. Di sisi lain, mereka merupakan mengelola pangan, menjaga benih, memelihara pengetahuan tradisional petani, berawal keluarga, sekaligus pemimpin dalam perjuangan mempertahankan lingkungan dan wilayah hidup masyarakat. Pengalaman perempuan suku bangsa minoritas Kailida di Dongi-Dongi, Sulawesi Tengah menunjukkan dengan jelas bagaimana isu gender dan lingkungan saling berkaitan. Bagi kami, tanah bukan sekedar tempat untuk bercocok tanam. Tanah adalah sumber kehidupan, pangan, identitas, kebudayaan, pengetahuan, dan masa depan rakyat. Dari pengalaman inilah kita dapat menilai bahwa keadilan gender dan keadilan lingkungan tidak dapat dipisahkan. Memahami keterkaitan gender dan ketidakadilan lingkungan. Ketidakadilan lingkungan terjadi ketika manfaat dan beban pemanfaatan maupun kerusakan lingkungan tidak dibagi secara adil. Hilangnya tanah pertanian berarti hilangnya sumber pangan dan pendapatan keluarga. Berkurangnya akses terhadap hutan dapat meningkatkan beban perempuan dalam mencari bahan pangan, kayu bakar, tanaman obat, dan kebutuhan rumah tangga lainnya. Ketika sumber penghidupan semakin sulit, perempuan seringkali menjadi pihak yang harus bekerja lebih keras untuk menjaga keluarganya tetap bertahan. Situasi diperparah saat ini di bawah pemerintahan Prabowo, di mana kebijakan dan program yang buruk dan korup, anti demokrasi dan anti rakyat harus dipertahankan di tengah krisis kronis diderita rakyat Indonesia. Pemerintah terus menutup mata dan telinga untuk atas kritik yang disampaikan gerakan mahasiswa dan rakyat. Program Propolis, MBG, dan KDMP yang menguras anggaran negara terus dijalankan dan menjadi prioritas yang meski mendapatkan tantangan dari rakyat. Tuntutan aksi dan kampanye masa berskala nasional yang dilancarkan rakyat Indonesia baik diinisiasi oleh kaum intelektual, progresif maupun berbagai kelas. Dari rakyat yang tertindas terhisap yang telah berlangsung berulang kali dan tidak satupun yang sungguh-sungguh dijadikan dasar kebijakan regulasi dan dengan demikian, persoalan lingkungan dapat memperbesar beban kerja domestik dan perawatan, ketidakamanan pangan, kemiskinan, ketergantungan ekonomi, kesenjangan gender, kerentanan terhadap kekerasan, serta keterbatasan perempuan dalam berpartisipasi dalam pengambilan keputusan. Dongi-dongi ketika persoalan menjadi persoalan gender. Saya adalah seorang petani dan bagian dari suku bangsa minoritas di Dongi-dongi, Sulawesi Tengah. Bagi masyarakat Dongi-dongi, tanah memiliki arti yang lebih jauh, lebih besar daripada sekedar aset ekonomi. Tanah adalah tempat kami bertani, menghasilkan pangan, membangun kehidupan keluarga, mempertahankan budaya, dan meneruskan kehidupan dan ke generasi berikutnya. Tanah adalah daulat atas tanah bangsa kami. Ketimpangan pemilikan perorangan atas alat produksi yang lapangan ekonomi telah melahirkan krisis ekonomi parah di Indonesia. Ia telah menjadi induk semang berbagai bentuk kekerasan terhadap kaum perempuan di tempat tinggal dan tempat kerja yang dilestarikan melalui kebijakan, regulasi, dan keputusan anti aspirasi dan kepentingan kaum perempuan yang dibuat oleh organ kekuasaan negara setengah jajahan di bawah dikte negara dan kekuatan imperialisme. Akses masyarakat terhadap tanah dan sumber daya alam mengalami berbagai pembatasan, termasuk setelah penetapan kawasan Taman Nasional Waringin. Dari masyarakat yang telah bergantung pada wilayah tersebut untuk bertani dan memenuhi kebutuhan hidup, pembatasan akses terhadap tanah menciptakan ketidakpastian dan konflik yang berkepanjangan. Perempuan merasakan dampak tersebut secara khusus. Perempuan memiliki peran besar dalam produksi pangan dan berkelanjutan rumah tangga. Artinya, konflik agraria dan kebijakan lingkungan tidak pernah bersifat netral gender perempuan yang berusaha mempertahankan hak atas tanah juga dalam menghadapi intimidasi dan kriminalisasi. Didongi-dongi, masyarakat pernah menerima peringatan, ancaman, bahkan penangkapan karena mempertahankan aktivitas pertanian yang diklaim Taman Nasional. Saya sendiri pernah mengalami intimidasi yang tidak hanya menimbulkan rasa takut bagi saya, tapi juga terhadap keluarga. Tekanan terhadap perempuan, pembelaan lingkungan dapat mempengaruhi kehidupan anak-anak, pendidikannya, dan kehidupan sehari-hari. Kekerasan terhadap perempuan pembela lingkungan bukan persoalan yang terpisah dari persoalan lingkungan. Ia merupakan bagian dari ketidakadilan lingkungan sendiri. Perempuan suku bangsa minoritas, kami adalah penjaga pengetahuan dan kehidupan. Saya mulai terlibat dalam perjuangan masyarakat sejak tahun 2002. Berbagai salah satu pendiri organisasi perempuan Dongi-Dongi dan Forum Petani Merdeka. Kami memulai mengorganisir perempuan secara khusus dan kaum tani secara umum untuk meningkatkan kesadaran mengenai konflik tanah, lingkungan, dan berbagai persoalan yang dihadapi rakyat. Pada tahun 2006, kami bergabung dengan seluruh. Melalui Seruni, kami terus memperkuat organisasi perempuan di tingkat lokal sebagai bagian dari pembangunan organisasi secara nasional. Bagi saya, berorganisasi sangat penting karena perempuan seringkali menghadapi persoalan yang sama sekali individual, tetapi tidak memiliki kekuatan untuk menyelesaikan masalah sendiri. Pengorganisasian perempuan adalah jalan untuk perubahan. Melalui organisasi perempuan dapat membangun keberanian, saling memberikan dukungan, berbagi pengetahuan, memahami dan haknya mengakses bantuan hukum, menyuarakan tuntutan kepada pemerintah, serta membangun solidaritas baik di level lokal, nasional, maupun internasional. Pengorganisasian juga mengubah cara perempuan melihat dirinya sendiri. Perempuan tidak lagi hanya melihat dirinya sebagai ibu, istri, petani, atau sebagai ibu rumah tangga, akan tetapi mereka mulai melibatkan dirinya sebagai pemimpin, pembela hak, pengambil keputusan, dan bagian penting dari perjuangan perubahan sosial. Dari dongi-dongi menjaga dari dongi-dongi ASEAN menjaga perspektif lokal penting. Pengalaman dongi-dongi mungkin terlihat lebih persoalan lokal, namun sebenarnya ini merupakan persoalan yang lebih luas di Asia Tenggara. Di berbagai negara ASEAN, perempuan menghadapi dampak pembangunan ekstraktif, perubahan iklim, deforestatif, konflik agraria, perkebunan skala besar, pembangunan infrastruktur, dan berbagai bentuk eksploitasi sumber daya alam karena monopoli dan perampasan tanah oleh negara dan perubahan dan perusahaan multinasional sebagai representasi berjasa besar, komprador, dan tuan tanah. Pada saat yang sama, perempuan, terutama perempuan suku bangsa, minoritas, dan perempuan pedesaan, seringkali memiliki ruang yang terbatas dalam proses pengambilan keputusan. Karena itu, kebijakan lingkungan ASEAN harus melihat pengalaman masyarakat akar rumput. Kebijakan regional tidak boleh hanya berbicara target emisi, konservasi ekonomi hijau, atau pembangunan berkelanjutan, tetapi juga memperkuat isu tentang monopoli dan perampasan tanah, sumber daya alam, kerusakan sosial dan ekologis yang siapa saja yang menanggung beban paling berat dari kerusakan tersebut. Hal tersebut penting untuk dipastikan agar transisi menuju pembangunan berkelanjutan tidak menciptakan bentuk untuk keadilan baru. Bagaimana ASEAN mewujudkan lingkungan yang aman, bersihkan, sehat, dan berkelanjutan? Ada beberapa langkah penting yang harus dilakukan. 1. Menjamin hak masyarakat atas tanah dan sumber daya alam. 2. Memastikan partisipasi perempuan secara penuh. 3. Melindungi perempuan pembela lingkungan dan hak asasi manusia. 4. Mengakui pengetahuan masyarakat suku bangsa minoritas dan perempuan. 5. Memastikan masyarakat suku bangsa minoritas menjadi bagian dari pembuatan kebijakan lingkungan. 6. Menjamin hak perempuan dan rakyat untuk berorganisasi dan berserikat. Kaum perempuan harus bangkit menentukan nasib hidupnya sekarang dan masa yang akan datang, untuk berjuang agar bisa hidup bebas dan maju tanpa dominasi imperialisme dan feodalisme dan kapitalis birokrat. Maka membangkitkan, mengorganisasikan, dan menggerakkan perempuan dan kaum tani ke dalam gerakan demokratis nasional adalah hak yang mutlak untuk dilakukan demi terciptanya keadilan gender dan keadilan lingkungan sosial masyarakat. Salam demokrasi.
Thank you so much, Agustin and Trina. And I think there have been some problems in the interpretation, but later on when we upload the video on YouTube, we'll be fixing those interpretation matters. But thank you so much, Agustin and um, Trina, for the presentation and for helping us. And of course, since this is in partnership, this webinar is in partnership with APNED, the Asia Pacific Network for Environmental Defenders. We have here Mati Balagat, the member of the Secretariat, to give us a brief about the Rise and Resist publication, Women Leading Environmental and Human Rights Defense in Asia and the Pacific. So, Mati, you have the floor.
Everyone. Hope I'm heard. On behalf of the Asian, it is my honor to introduce our new publication, Rise and Resist, Women Leading Environmental and Human Rights Defense in Asia. So APNED is a regional solidarity network of environmental programs, grassroots movements, indigenous peoples groups, climate activists, and environmental advocates across Asia and the Pacific. The network was formed in 2018 in response to the increasing attacks against environmental defenders in the region. Since then, APNED has worked to advance their recognition, protection, and meaningful participation through solidarity and emergency support, education, advocacy, campaigns, and engagement with international human rights institutions. This new publication forms part of that continuing effort. It seeks to document not only the threats and structural barriers faced by women environmental human rights defenders, but also their leadership, knowledge, agency, and collective resistance. Rise and Resist brings together the stories of 10 women defenders from 8 countries: Cambodia, India, Indonesia, Mongolia, Nepal, Pakistan, Papua New Guinea, and the Philippines. They come from different generations, communities, professions, and movements. They are indigenous leaders, farmers, lawyers, researchers, youth activists, community organizers, and human rights advocates. The publication also includes the experience of a transgender woman, reminding us that gender, poverty, indigenous identity, age, and other social conditions shape how environmental harm and climate change are experienced. So among the women featured in this publication are Agustin and Jonila, whom we heard from earlier in this story. So alongside Agustin, the publication also introduces us to Savannah, a young Cambodian defender who uses media and environmental investigation to expose deforestation, sand mining, and resource extraction. Lina, an indigenous youth activist from Papua, combines grassroots organizing and digital advocacy while confronting online gender-based attacks. Mayalmit, an indigenous lecture leader from India, defends the Tista River and helps communities rebuild after climate disaster. We also need Manmaya, who has spent decades strengthening indigenous women's leadership in Nepal, Azra, who works with rural women in Pakistan to protect biodiversity, indigenous seed, and food sovereignty, and Erna, a Mongolian lawyer who uses the law to advance environmental justice and defend human rights. There's also Cressida, an indigenous leader from Papua New Guinea, who transformed her experiences of violence into collective action among women affected by mining. Jahan, the transgender advocate from Pakistan, shows why disaster response and climate policy must recognize people facing multiple and intersecting forms of exclusion. Although their circumstances differ, their stories reveal common patterns. Environmental conflicts are never only about the environment. They are also struggles over land, resources, livelihoods, political power, identity, participation, and justice. Women defenders face the same reprisal directed at other environmental defenders: surveillance, intimidation, criminalization, arbitrary arrests, displacement, and violence. But they also experience gender specific attacks, including sexual harassment, misogynist threats, online abuse, character assassination, and discrimination intended to undermine their credibility and force them back into socially prescribed. The publication also shows how environmental degradation and climate change deepen existing inequalities. Women frequently absorb the consequences through increased unpaid care work, food insecurity, livelihood loss, poor health, displacement, and heightened exposure to violence. Indigenous women, rural women, young women, and transgender women often face additional barriers to protection, participation, and justice. But Rise and Resist is not simply a record of harm. It is a testament to leadership, courage, and transformation. These women protect rivers, forests, coastlines, biodiversity, ancestral territories, and community livelihoods. They preserve seeds, indigenous knowledge, document violations, use the law, mobilize communities, build solidarity, and create space for other women to lead. Their stories affirm that environmental justice, Gender justice, climate justice, indigenous peoples' rights, and human rights are inseparable. They also leave us with an urgent challenge. While women defenders protect our environment and our collective future, who protects them? What we hope is that this publication will inspire governments, international institutions, civil society, donors, and action by ending impunity, strengthening gender responsive protection, ensuring prior and informed consent, and providing sustained support for women-led movements. So the women featured in Rise and Resist and those who spoke earlier are really not merely victims or beneficiaries. They are leaders shaping more just, democratic, and sustainable society. Their struggles are not theirs alone. They are a collective call for solidarity and for action from all of us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Matthew. And really, it really poses us the question when, since women protects us, especially the women defenders who protects the environment and our collective future, then who protects them? And that's something that we really have to reflect on this webinar. So yeah, thank you so much to Jonila, Lini, Agustin, and and even Triana for the interpretation, although we've had some problems earlier. But again, when we do the the recording session, which will be uploaded on our YouTube channel, we'll be fixing it on the recorded session. So yeah, I'm inviting Jonila, Lini, and Augustine again to turn on their cameras for the open forum and question and answer portion of the webinar. Oh, okay, Matty, they're asking if they have printed copies. I think these are folks from Malaysia, from Indonesia as well. So perhaps if you guys get to go in the Philippines, um, okay, we'll ask them. I think Matty has dropped the call, but we'll definitely ask our friends from APNED if they can provide us some copies of um the report. But yeah, let me resend again the soft copy of the report. But we'll definitely ask our friends from APNED if they have printed copies. Okay. Yeah. Oh, that's so strange. Hold on. Okay, any questions? Okay. Sorry, Janila, can you try again to turn on your camera? Are there perfect questions or clarifications? We will, if you raise your hand, you can use the raise hand button, and then we can allow you to talk, since this is a Zoom webinar feature. So you just use the raise hand button if you have any questions, and then we can invite you to talk here to the panel.
Pauline, if there is no question, maybe I can add something. Since,
Go ahead.
yeah. So I think I want to add something on the what regional mechanism can do to address the situations. Um, um, First and foremost, I think recognition is very important. If there are certain group are not recognized in the mechanism that is responding to the environmental and environmental, climate, and ecological crisis, then the group will always be pushed to the margin, right? So once a recognition um, is there, then I think it's easier for us to move to the next step. So by means recognition is important. I don't or ASEAN Soji Caucus not advocating for a new rights as many other institutions or other officials always accuse us to asking for new rights. No, 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 we're not asking for a new rights, but rather we are like the queer people are part of the citizens of all Southeast Asian countries, or rather I could say, because some of us also stateless, so they're not belong to any nations. So I rather say that we're born and belong to the region, to this motherland, despite of the border or the border recognition by the paper of stating you're a citizens of which country. So I think as long there is that recognition, then the non-discrimination principle should be then come along with all the policy of responding to the to this crisis. So and when non-discrimination's principle is applied to all people regardless of their gender identity, of their um, indigenous identity, of their sexual orientation identity, just seeing them as a people, a human being belong to that land, then in responding to the disaster or in mitigating to the disaster, then groups can be integrated, or people who are usually not recognized and oftenly left behind can be integrated in the existing system that we will be pushing to be more even inclusive. I think that's what I want to add on here. I mean, ASEAN has now the declarations on ASEAN environmental rights declaration, safe, clean, and healthy environment. Although it is very, yeah, it's a declaration. I think we need more. We need something even more stronger than a principle of declarations. But also not only in that a declaration policy, but also has to be integrated in all a mechanism and policy that responding to the crisis. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rini. And those are really good and valid points, especially when you mentioned that on recognition that it should come along with non-discrimination, because actually prior to during the process of the writing of the ASEAN Declaration on the right to a safe, clean, healthy, and sustainable environment, we really push for the inclusion of the LGBTQIA plus to be in the text. But as we all know, the ASEAN isn't ready for that yet, I guess would be the term, or there some ASEAN member states were still not comfortable on having that. But of course, that's what we're here, is that we really have to have that in the text in some sort. And like you said, you guys are not asking for more rights. It's really a recognition, and which it also lacked really. Because in the declaration it just acknowledged women and girls, children and youth, older persons, and other stuff that's and other sectors as vulnerable groups, but we're still missing the queer communities. So yeah, any more questions? Okay, there we have a really good question from one of our participants. how to communicate with environmental and human rights defenders, especially between Myanmar and the Asia Pacific Region Network on creating issues, especially for women and girls, and on feminism. Any of our panelists who wants to answer this question? Yes, Jonila, go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, I just also want to promote if um the one who asked the question is focusing on Asia Pacific, I guess you can contact APNED, um Mati Balagat, the one who discussed earlier. They have just published uh regarding women environmental and human rights defenders.
We have APNED also for that. Thanks, Janila, for amplifying the report from APNED. Okay. Another one, how can ASEAN environmental policies become more inclusive for the LGBTQIA plus and other marginalized groups? Okay. Perhaps, Lini, building from what you said, um, how can it be more inclusive? Or Agustin and Triana, maybe want to add something? Yeah. Matty, please go ahead.
Sorry, I couldn't message. So, to the one who was reaching out about having how to communicate with Asia Pacific Region Network and Myanmar. APNED has some Myanmar members, and we would love to get in touch. You can reach out to us through our social media, Asia Pacific Network, info at apned.net.
Thank you, Matty. So again, for APNED, if you want to contact them, it's info@apned.org. So yeah, going back to the question, perhaps Lily or Janila or Agustin and Triana, if you want to answer, how can ASEAN environmental policies become more inclusive of the queer communities and other marginalized groups?
Um, I guess one of the main challenges that we have on this ASEAN declaration is first the recognition of the environmental defender word itself, right? They cannot even accept that how we call ourselves. It should first start from there. Um, I guess as APNED have before, we have already how important this recognition, how necessary recognition is. Because as long as you recognize that someone is an environmental defender, no matter who she is or who he is, who they are, whatever their gender is, the ASEAN has to protect them. I guess it should start from there. They have to recognize the importance of our work as environmental defenders first.
Thanks, Janila. Lini, would you like to add on that?
Yeah, I think I want to emphasize on the non-discrimination principle should be, applicable for all. So that's what we really need to push for the ASEAN can be very inclusive in responding to the climate crisis. But then we need to go back to the discussion earlier when we started this webinar, when the capitalist system that is in a way created, this system that benefit only the elite and the capitalist power, capitalist class, then I think we need to build on the consciousness among the people that the division among the people that we tend to segregate, or we tend to see this group are noble and the other group are not belong to the norm, is what the capitalist system really wants. And we really need to dismantle that. And if we cannot push that to to that ASEAN level power, we may change that from where we start our advocacy works or our organizing work. So I think that's I it's very important for me to say this so that we don't lose our hope to create change, and for the people who are basically affected by the climate, ecological, and environmental crisis, losing their hope. So when I think when we all together push and point out that there is a system that create us so that we are fighting over each other instead of you know pointing the points up to the system, and that's what we can do also. And I believe when ASEAN applied really applying the non-discrimination principle, then then it sounds very simplifying the the issues. But from there, if we push for non-discrimination principle for all, I maybe there's some change. See, it's very different. If it's very difficult to putting putting ASEAN lens into, or um to hold ASEAN accountable for, because ASEAN in the mechanism also very weak in a sense. So it's very hard question to address to. And I think us as the people, as a movement, that we might can change that from our own locality, hoping that the national and regional can change to the positive way, or to better address the situations.
Thank you, Lilian. That's a good explanation and for reminding us to not lose hope, of course. And yeah, Triane, can you try speaking? You'd like to add also? There, we can hear you clearly now. Oh, sorry, Rihanna, hold on. I think we're still having problems on the languages. Um, sorry, can you try speaking again? I think you're still in interpretation.
Okay.
Okay, there. Is it? Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Um am I audible now to the main audio? Hello.
Yes, yes, it's all good now.
Okay. So for how can ASEAN environmental policies become more inclusive for us? First is explicitly recognize the queer people in environmental and climate policies. This is matters because what is not recognized in policy is often invisible in implementation, budgeting, and also data collection. So, ASEAN SOGI Caucus has significantly called for the regional environmental rights framework to address this gap. Second is move from consultations to meaningful participations. Um, Third is collect better and safer data. Fourth is make climate finance and disaster response genuinely inclusive. Next is protect the queer people and other marginalized environmental defenders. And lastly, apply an intersectional approach, not as a one size fits all gender approach. For example, an environmental policy may say we have included women, but which women? Is it indigenous women farmer, a migrant worker, migrant woman worker, a woman with disabilities, a young queer woman, or a transgender person may experience the same environmental crisis very differently. So recognize community knowledge and leadership also become a strong inclusion that we would like to share in this forum. So yeah, that's
Okay.
all.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Triana slash Agustin. Yeah, I think we have time for another question. So from the Q&A, um, how to mainstream the LGBTQIA plus is also a part of that share the same struggles, but sometimes not included in the decision making itself. So how to better acknowledge this in the movement without it becoming a tokenism or even siloed in the climate movement?
I think I can address this question. So specifically for ASEAN Sogi Caucus and its member and partner, we've started we started to integrate the issues around environmental, climate, and ecological crisis into our work. It is not because we want to be in the radar because climate change is everywhere topic. No, but we realize that again, whenever disaster uh, drive by the ecological, environmental, and climate crisis happen, we see that the queer community are always pushed to the margin, and we started to develop our scoping study back after the COVID pandemic, because that was the first, eye opening for us, where there are so many queer community who are not receiving any good relief from the state because of their identity, and we try to navigate a way on how the community can better access the relief. And then slowly we conduct a learning session on the environmental justice, climate justice, and ecological justice and see what are other impacts, and are the impacts experienced the same by other counterpart who are not queer. So we started to do the work since 2021, and the way we do it, we engage with non queer organizations, and engage more with the environmental or climate focus group who advocates for the environmental justice. And we also, kept in our mind to not also fall under the green capitalism trap, and we also try to not fall under the greenwashing trap, where many of the queer organizations, particularly in the West, who who are you know who have access to climate solutions um, uh, issues, and then because of fail to understand the cause of the crisis, and it's so easy to fall under the trap of, again, the capitalist agenda. So that's what we are, at least what ASEAN Segi Caucus can do step by step. And we recently again just completed our regional convening together with Greenpeace Southeast Asia, APWLD, um, Hands of Mother Earth, Forum Asia, ARIEL, in Bangkok last week. And we do that because we don't want to work in silo. And we realize that work in silo will not achieve any goals or the world that we envision all together. I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Linia. That's really, really very good points. Triana and Agustin, do you like to add more on that?
I think it's enough. Lini have shared completely comprehensive. Thank you, Lini.
Yes, and I think we're really running out of time, but we have seen all the questions in the Q&A and also on the chat box. So we our email address is ariallaw.asia@gmail.com. So please feel free to email us, and we will be reaching out separately to our panelists, and we will try our best to respond your to your questions. So yeah, I'll just we lost Jonila earlier, but we have her back. So hold on. So yeah, perhaps some parting words from our panelists. Perhaps a sentence or two on how we can achieve gender and environmental justice in ASEAN. Yeah. Since we're down to our last minute, Jonila, Lini, Agustin, and Triana, you have a last sentence or two, like one sentence or two sentences on how we can achieve gender and environmental justice in ASEAN.
Okay, I can start. So I think that's we the people must unite, and we need to against the division that created by the capitalist class. And by means of division is to look at the queer people as other group that are not belong to the group, or indigenous people are not belong to the other group, but we are the people. And we experience the climate, environmental, and ecological crisis, but we experience it differently. Because of that, we have to unite against the ruling class, and hopefully by uniting our power we can achieve the justice that we dream of. And one last thing, that we released the climate justice manifesto, no climate justice without queer justice, that posted in the chat by Ryan earlier, my colleague at the ASEAN Segi Caucus. If you support us, you can take a look and read the manifesto and endorse the manifesto if you would like. And connect with us, ASEAN Sagi Caucus in the region. Thank you.
Thanks, Lini. Janila?
I totally agree with Lini. But aside from that, I also want to highlight, as a woman and also a member of the LGBTQIA community, our inspiration to attain system change and fighting the capitalist system against environmental plunder and gender injustice, as women and members of the LGBTQIA community, we can start in seeing that all of these crises we are experiencing more. We have more reasons, not just as environmental defenders, as a human being living in this planet, but also as a woman and member of the LGBTQIA community. We have more reasons to fight against this system.
Thank you, Jonila and Triana and Agustin.
Or maybe I can share on behalf of Agustin. So, inclusive environmental policy for us goes beyond merely inviting marginalized groups to the decision making table. They must have a voice, influence, protection, and the opportunity to determine the future of their own environments, including women and girls. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us on a Tuesday. And thanks again, Augustin, Triana, Lini, Jonila, and APNED and ASEAN Soji Caucus for this very insightful webinar. And we'd like to end with a note that there's no climate justice with no queer justice. Thank you so much, everyone. See you on the next one.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.